What is ISO? Hey there, this week we are getting into camera basics. We're just gonna go through all the settings and everything you should know about your camera to start shooting. Some of you might already know this, some of you might not, and some of you might pick up on some new tricks or tips or ways to learn things about your camera. Today we're starting with ISO. So ISO is the digital gain of your sensor. It stems from ASA, which is how they would rate film stock. I won't get too much into that, so we'll just focus on ISO for today. So think of ISO as a digital boost or gain of the amount of light coming onto your sensor. The lower the number, the less light the sensor is letting onto it. The higher the number, the more light. Darker image, brighter image. The way I like to think about ISO is if your sensor was like a stereo. So let's say you're listening to music on a stereo and the volume is really, really low. Well, the bass and the treble and the mids, they're not gonna come through quite as well. You'll still be able to hear them, but very faintly. Similar to ISO, if you have a very low ISO, if the volume is down, you're letting a lot less light onto your sensor, so it's gonna be a darker image. You won't be able to see things as well. If you turn your stereo up a lot, you're gonna introduce a lot of noise into the music. The more you turn it up, those basses are gonna get muffled and the mids are gonna get crackly until it's just sounds like. Same with your ISO. The higher you turn it up, the more noise you're gonna introduce into that sensor. And that's where we end up with really noisy images, sometimes to the point where it's not even usable. So yes, it's louder, you're letting more light onto the sensor, it'll be a brighter image, but it might not be a usable image if there's too much noise. And that's where we find that sweet spot, that perfect volume to listen to your music. For your digital sensor, the ISO equivalent of that is your native ISO. Your native ISO is the manufacturer's rating of that digital sensor's best noise to signal ratio. Basically what that means is, where's the sensor's sweet spot? Where does it have the most detail in the shadows, the most detail in the highlights, but the least noise possible? That's your native ISO. On most cameras, that's anywhere from 400 to 800. Although I know some Sonys get kind of crazy with it up in the 2000s. So there's technically no right or wrong ISO. Your native ISO is just the manufacturer saying, this is where we think it works best. Now some cameras, like the one I'm shooting on now, have what's called a dual native ISO. This was popularized by the VariCam from Panasonic that had a dual native ISO of 800 and 5000. Now pretty much every camera has that. I don't want to get too technical, mostly because I'm probably wrong, but the layman's terms that I understand is the dual native ISO is basically two different circuitries going into your digital sensor that have two different native ISOs. So you'll see as an example here, when we boost the ISO from this camera's initial base native of 640, we will see it gets increasingly noisier when we approach 4000, until we get to its second native ISO of 4000. When we switch that over, now the image is super clean again. It's a great way for shooting in low light. What you can also do with your ISO is shift your dynamic range. So when you have a higher ISO, you're actually shifting your dynamic range more into the highlights. Lower ISO, you're shifting your dynamic range more into the shadows. Where this might come in handy is, let's say you're outside and it's bright and sunny and you want one more stop of highlight information. If you have your ISO set at 800, you can put it to 1600 and then put one stop of neutral density filtration on your camera to keep the same exposure but gain one stop of highlight information. Basically, when you double your ISO, you're increasing the light by one stop. When you half it, you're decreasing the light by one stop. So 800, 1600, 3200, each one of those is one more stop of light you're letting onto the sensor. And that's ISO.